obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. I am Krista Olien, and I'm joined by Clyde Wilson and Leigh Thomas. Today, we are going to discuss our wonderful interview where Clyde and Leigh spoke with Kendra Petty. She's currently with Way.com, but she has an extensive history in the parking industry. She's touched many parts and been a part of many companies, acquisitions, mergers, all the things. Clyde and Kendra have a long history, so it was really great to have her on the episode and get to talk through where she's been, where she's going, and her current role with Way.com and kind of how she sees the industry from her unique perspective. So I'll start with Clyde. Clyde, do you have a favorite takeaway from Kendra's episode?
Well, Kendra's episode was very good from start to finish because she's very knowledgeable of the business. I met Kendra back in the early days when she was first coming into the business, and I knew right away that this wasn't just a job to her. You could tell right from the very beginning that this was serious business and she was a serious person. So she's contributed a lot over the years and worked really hard. Kendra, I've spent most of my time in the parking industry traveling, not as much now as I used to, but traveling. And of all the thousands of managers out there running around in the parking industry, Kendra was the only one I ever ran into in the airports. And it was constant. We always ran into each other in the airports. So sometimes we would have enough time between flights to go grab lunch or a drink, and we always enjoyed it. So my takeaway from the podcast with Kendra was she's very professional, very knowledgeable of this industry. She has worked very hard on the operations side, and she's carrying that with her over to this new company that's kind of a new look for her. So we're very lucky to have her out there on the leading edge as this transformational industry starts beginning to reshape itself. And she's a great person to have on the front end. She's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but just as a person, she has a really interesting story, and Clyde and her kind of bantered a little bit. She has a book that she wrote. I haven't read it. I know Clyde has. I don't think Leigh has, but I intend on going to find that so I can look into it. So we kind of mentioned it in her episode, but it's something to look into because she has a lot of knowledge just in the industry for parking, but also kind of some personal stories that are very interesting. So just as a human, very great interviewee to have on our podcast. So we're really lucky for that. And I think, Leigh, did you meet Kendra for the first time at NPA? Is that where, or was it at Pi?
No, I actually haven't had the pleasure of meeting her yet.
Okay.
But we did connect because I interviewed her over email for our newsletter. She was our professional spotlight earlier in 2025. So that's how she and I began our rapport.
That's right. And Clyde, we saw her at the IPMI in Fort Worth. She was down for that. So I got to meet her in person and kind of talk with her. But just thinking about the industry, one of the things that I love about talking to someone in the parking industry is that everyone has a different background and kind of how they got here. We've seen a lot of commonalities, people starting like in the Joaquin, whenever we spoke with him, he started at the bottom, and that's been a common theme. And then kind of moving up through the ranks per se. And typically we see a mentor paired with that transition up through the ranks in the industry. Kendra's story is a little bit different because she kind of paved her own way, especially jumping around, as she said, from different companies. She would spend a short time at each company. And like she was saying, she would move a lot.
She was transferring a lot. Yeah, she didn't have a family close to her, so she was easy to transfer.
Yeah.
Which was great for her because it gave her this expanding role of responsibility, but it also gave her this expanding view of the industry as she moved into more and more interesting locations.
Yeah, and the locations, there's a there's a different dynamic in every region across the United States. And I feel like with her physically being moved in different places, she got to experience and really be in the weeds of those different dynamics across the country. So I think that is a really interesting piece of her story that is unique. And we talk a lot about mentorship. She took all of the experiences and the positions that she was exposed to and took those and learned from them, instead of having one single person that she can kind of point to and say, that's who taught me everything I know. She has a wide variety of contacts or people that have influenced her experience in the industry, which has also been kind of unique from other people that we've talked to and a lot of other people in the industry. So I loved that part. Just thinking, there's a segment of people that haven't really had a mentor, but they are still at the top of their class because of the experience and the commitment and devotion to parking that they have put in just on a personal level. Leigh, what was one of your favorite takeaways from that episode?
There were so many things. One of the first things she mentioned early in the interview is that being attentive to details is very important if you are seeking professionalism or growth. I always mess this expression up, but it's something like dot the I's and cross the T's or something. And I appreciate her mentioning that, because sometimes I feel like I'm so focused on the big picture, on the forward thinking, that I forget to dot my I's and cross my T's. But she spoke that is a very important part of being a professional in any industry, and something that I think is important for us to remember. I was intrigued by her passion for growth. She really had a lot to say about organic growth and about being aggressive about growth and knowing the why of growth. Did you guys notice any of that or think any of that was cool with me?
Well, Kendra's background, and I'll mention this briefly, like we've talked about earlier with some other podcasts with people who started as cashiers or started as valets. She didn't really start as the cashier or the valet, but she started in a very demanding building as the manager of cashiers and valets. And the people they were valeting were all out of Hollywood. So out of that background, because this was a place that had a talent agent in the building, and so she started at a tough location and learned and survived it. But she, as she moved forward, that attention to detail, I noticed that about Kendra from the very beginning, early on in meeting her. You could tell she had that close attention to detail. But she started there. She made a decision that she loved this industry, and she's the kind to just get to know it. And she did. She's very, very, everybody that meets her understands pretty quickly that this is her home.
Yeah, I think there's a catch-22 to the detail portion. I feel like sometimes you can find yourself stuck in the details without looking forward or looking ahead or future planning. But I think it takes a really special individual that can focus on both. Focus on the details of right here, right now, and then focus on maybe even the details of what is going to happen in the future. So keeping both of those in a nice, equitable balance is really unique. And so I liked that. That was one of my takeaways too, about her growth mindset.
Mm-hmm. It's just a thing called managing your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
People have strengths, but to do day to day, you have to deal with so many things, and your strength may not match what has to happen over here. So Kendra's really good at managing her strengths. She's very detail oriented, but she's also always been a tremendous marketing person. She's always done very well with that. Kendra's, I'll mention this briefly, Kendra's book, and I have that right here. The title of it was I'm Not Dead.
She said that in the episode, yeah.
Yeah, it was I'm Not Dead. And Kendra has kind of lived on the edge, and then she's had some close calls in her life. She's had a background that's interesting. To read the book, I knew a lot of it, but I didn't know all of it. And it was interesting to read this, knowing her and watching this book shape who she's turned out to be. Very interesting.
Yeah, we can't help but let our personal life bleed into our professional life sometimes. And that can go one of two ways sometimes, but it sounds like she's really taken that. And I think she probably has a opportunity to support people now that she's been in these upper level management roles where she can connect with people on a level that maybe other people can't. So that's a thing I appreciate also.
As we're talking about this idea of growth and collaboration and managing our strengths, I think if I don't have what it takes to manage my strengths and be all things in my profession, then I really need to learn to collaborate with and depend on my coworkers. Like here at TPN, my wonderful coworker Trina, she is so detail oriented and she is so good at fighting for those details and making sure they're right. And I have learned to really depend on her because that is her strength and it is not mine. And so when we think about growth and how to be intentional about it, we need to know what strengths are already in the house and then go grow in a way that brings on strengths that don't already exist. And I think that's something that Kendra and Way.com are doing for the parking industry is they're increasing some connections between silos so that we can be more professional and have more strength.
This, this industry, and we've talked about all this many times, you have locations, you may have hundreds of them, 200 or 300, and they're not in front of you. There may not even be in the same city. They're spread all over a city and to other parts of the city or into other states. So if you're not detail oriented a little bit, you can't keep up with all the details in all of those locations that you have that are just not in front of you every day. So it's just a part of our industry. We've talked about it before. And if you don't have those skills, then you're not still here.
Yeah. And I think one piece that she definitely has kind of sewn through all the topics that were discussed on that episode is this idea that we are still a service industry. And TPN talks about that a lot. We are a customer service industry. We will always be a customer service industry, no matter what kind of gets stacked on top of that. And just thinking about from a business perspective, Way.com inviting Kendra into their space when they knew that she had that mentality was really smart. So she has, like she said, her story, her background, she's been in parking management and operations her whole life until this. And now she's kind of part of this tech company, but she's bringing all of that with her and that mentality that, yeah, okay, we can be a tech company, but we still are supporting this industry that is a service industry. And how do we do that? And how do we take all of these different things that a car owner or car driver needs and stitch them all together to provide this service? And she's even seen in her short time there that it was very segmented. And now she's brought the idea that no, it all goes together. It's a package deal to serve the customer, to serve the driver. So customer service, I mean, we won't ever get away from it. So how do we keep that as our foundation and stay grounded in that as we explore all of these new things?
That's a great statement and a great question, because we're already seeing the people who don't understand that concept starting to impact this industry. And we're seeing the people move in here who think this is a tech business, who don't understand the customers will be here long after the tech has changed and changed and changed and changed. We are most definitely 100% a service industry or a support business. We're here to support other industries, and we're a service business to make sure that the customers who use that support are able to get to where they need to go. Forgetting that will be the biggest mistake we as an industry make. So what happens is there are a lot of people like us and Kendra who will be right in the middle of this, and we will never let anybody forget who we really are.
Yeah.
We're doing it. We do it every time we have a podcast. Every podcast, we tend to remind ourselves and remind anybody that's listening who we really are. The tech's great. It's a lot of fun to be able to do things today that I used to try to do over the years, and it was so hard and so time consuming. And today it's a few clicks and I've got the information I need. All that does is make me more knowledgeable to go provide the support that we need. So we're a support business. It's interesting. That was a great question because it's really maybe one of the most important questions you can ask. How do we not lose that? Because we have a lot of people pecking at it, trying to turn us into something else. But in the end, we're a support business that provides a service.
And that kind of speaks to something else that she mentioned, just having ruthless opponents. So if we're a customer service industry, Clyde, you just mentioned several things that are ruthlessly opposing that and trying to distract us from our core value.
Right. Well, you have people that are out there on the top of parking companies now who are not really support people, who are not really customer service people. They're something else, but they're in charge. And so they don't see us as a service industry. Their view is only at the technology side of being able to use that technology and to value the company higher. And they're not thinking about the support side. And we won't go into naming who they are, but we all could.
It is a challenge from the parking operator's perspective, though, because they have to provide a service to the driver, but also to the property. And so they have to be thinking about it in two directions, not one directional service. So like if I'm a waitress at a restaurant, I'm providing a service to my customer and I receive a tip based upon that and I get to keep that, right? I get to keep that. That's not the case. They're the middleman. They're the third party that is kind of in the middle of who owns the building, who's actually providing the concrete that is serving this customer, but also providing the face-to-face service. So it's an interesting dynamic that parking management teams have to navigate.
We talk about that so often here, that parking operators have the hardest job. Well, actually, Clyde mentioned that hospital managers have the hardest job. So maybe parking operators have the second hardest job.
Second hardest job. Mm-hmm. A facility director at a hospital, I think I've always thought that was the hardest job I've ever seen. But managing his hospital is also a hard job because they're tough to work for.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about another kind of changing gears here, another topic that Kendra talked about was, and Leigh kind of segued this in a great way, was talking about women in the industry. And I just want to take a moment to say I appreciate Clyde and the way that he has really supported that within TPN internally. He does have a lot of daughters and a lot of granddaughters, but he has taken our team and he has really instilled in all of us that we can do this in a very testosterone heavy industry. We as women can do this. And he believes that we have the skills and that we can provide something valuable to parking. And so I love that topic came up during Kendra's episode because she was one of the trailblazers for women in the parking industry. And she went through things that we will probably never have to or get to experience. I don't know. It depends on which way you look at it. But she kind of blazed a trail for gals in the industry. And I value that and I appreciate it so much. And I don't take it for granted that Clyde has really supported our team in that way as well. So he's been an encouragement, and you can really tell through his relationships that he has out in the industry that he supports that. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Clyde and take this opportunity to say I'm glad that topic came up, and I am glad to be a part of a company where that is valued.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you saying. I hope I've done my part. You guys have all contributed greatly to our industry, and I've watched it change over the years. When Kendra started, Barbara Chance, and maybe at an IPMI show at that time, there may have been 10 women there. Mm-hmm. And that number has grown a lot since then and is continuing to grow. So we're glad to see that because we're an industry that needs all of us.
Yeah, and I think it's really neat because it brings a perspective that we don't need an all women industry either, right? We need the balance of both. We need what each type of person can bring to the industry. And she talked a lot about diversifying the products that they bring through way.com. But I think diversifying the industry as a whole is also important, just across the people and the capabilities and what the industry has to offer. It's just a really important topic that can't be overlooked and is definitely important.
When I left Central Parking and moved to Memphis to start a new company that we had for a short amount of time, one of my first locations was a valet location. And you know who my two valets were? And I have a funny story, so I have to tell my story. But Angela Jacks and Mel Brown were the two valets. So I had two female valets. So I was the only company, I think, in that part of the world that I had ever seen that my whole valet staff were females. So that was funny. After about a year and a half, of course, they're valeting cars and we're busy. And so they have to jump in a car, back it into a space, put it in there, go jump on the man lift, come down, get the next one, right? So Angela comes to me one day and she says, Mr. Wilson, I want to buy a new car. Would you go to the car dealership with me to look at the car? And I said, well, sure, I'll take you. So I took her to the car dealer and they got these cars lined up and the salesman, this is Memphis, 1985 or 6, right? And so I'm saying that she's buying the car. And he says, okay. So he says, do you want to take it for a drive? And she said, sure. So he had to let her drive. So he gets in the other side. And that was great. They went for a drive. They come back. And I stood back. And I remember this going, watch this. Angela pulled that car up, slammed it in reverse, backed in. And that guy's going, ah! And she hit it perfectly, just like she always did. As soon as she pulled up, I mean, she wasn't planning anything. She was just being Angela parking a car, right?
Do it every day, hundreds of times a day.
So she wasn't thinking about what was about to happen, but I did. When I saw it, it hit me. I said, oh, look at this. This is going to be fun. And so
did you take out your phone and take a video?
Well, it was 1985. Sure, I had my phone out. So as soon as they got out of the car, I walked over to him and said, she's one of the best valets in the city. And he goes, oh.
Oh, times have changed.
Yes, they did a wonderful job. So I've tried to do my part, guys, besides having daughters and granddaughters.
That's important too. Yeah, I think just throughout the whole conversation, I really appreciated how there was a really northern star that was always like, you can tell that Kendra has a really strong North Star that she follows, and she's got it and she's on it. And you can see that in all of the different ways she thinks about things. So I think just having a character like her in the industry helps bring everyone up and helps everyone keep that North Star focus, which the industry needs. I mean, the conversation discussed standardization, and I think having that point that everyone is working towards is a part of that. And so having each individual player knowing that that's the goal, that's where we're headed, everyone's kind of on the same track, going the same direction, different speeds, different variables, yes, but all headed in the same direction with a common goal. So I appreciated that, and I like that we share that. We share a lot of things in common in our beliefs.
Yeah, I think that's a very key thing to have noticed about Kendra. And it's the reason in this, she's been in this male-dominated society for a fairly long time. So when she came into it, she didn't have many advantages. And she survived it and become a leader in the business. So you really have to look at her and think very highly of what she has been able to accomplish. And if you'll read her book, you'll find she didn't have a great start. She had a really, really tough start.
I was very impressed with her grit. I appreciated her story about when they were trying to acquire airports and just getting that first one, and how hard she worked and how hard her team worked, plus the amount of time they had to wait for that to be successful. Like, that shows some grit. And I wonder if we could inspire each other to be more gritty somehow, because this is a hard job we do.
It is, and that's a great point. It is a hard job that we do, and it's also a job that, most of our clients don't really think that highly of us. We're a low side of their totem pole, right? If it's a university, well, they're worried about running a university. We're just the parking piece of it. If it's an airport, they're worried about running an airport. We're just the parking guys that collect the parking money. If it's a commercial office building, they have a 64-story commercial office building that they're in charge of, and we're just the part down at the bottom that does that. So we're never on the top of that list, but we have a really, really hard job to do. And so we have to do it, and we have to have the grit to get the owner's attention sometimes when we need it.
And we have to have the systems and training in place to act like top row people while we're waiting to be respected and cared for. Like what Joaquin was talking about, put your pin in your uniform and have systems that raise your professionalism.
We, as an auxiliary industry, just the way we've been viewed all along, we have to kind of go above and beyond to set that expectation that we can be held to this higher standard, and we should be, because we provide a valuable service. We are not the back burner service. We provide something valuable to your building. Again, we've mentioned this before. We are the first people that they see being down in the parking garage or over in the parking garage. We are the last people. So we have the first point of contact and the last point of contact, and bookending that with something good and high quality is so important for that building and that, that facility. And whether it's a hospital or a hotel or residential or whatever it is, that is valuable, cannot be overlooked as an auxiliary service. And so having those high standards for the service that we provide helps property management and ownership recognize the importance of what the parking industry brings to their business and supports their business by doing.
We talked about a little of this yesterday when we were or 2 days ago when we were reviewing Joaquin's podcast. And we've talked about this subject a couple of times before in other ones. And it's something that we as the Parking Network have certainly noticed, that when the parking industry is trying to need something out of the ownership, we're not doing a good job of preparing a presentation to the ownership to explain the priorities of this. And I've noticed it. I probably thought about this for 20 years of what a poor job we as an industry do when we're trying to communicate up to the people that are the owners or the airport manager or that tough facilities director at a hospital that has so much responsibility, or the building manager, and trying to prepare how to get what we need. So many of the failures, as we as the parking industry have looked at, as we as the Parking Network have looked at, as we look at when we are auditing, so many of the failures are just that the parking management didn't understand how to ask for what they need, how to explain the importance and why we need this and what this does to that operation. And we've seen that over and over and over again. And it's still out there, very much out there. So what happens is you don't get what you need, you end up running a crappy operation. And then the owner gets mad at you for running a crappy operation.
But like we discussed in our follow-up to Joaquin's episode, you have to be thinking ahead about what you're going to need and be sure that you are presenting that to your property management in an equitable amount of time to accomplish that goal. So you have to, you have to be thinking ahead, but also preparing for what's to come so that you can prepare them appropriately.
We've talked about this, as I said many times, about our ability to really look at and understand our things that we need to move forward from the client's point of view. So we have to be able to look at our parking industry that we know and turn it around and being able to communicate to the owners in the language that they can understand of what the priorities are. So, as we've done this podcast, I've thought about this a lot. We've become very fortunate to be able to do these podcasts over the last year and a half. Look at the people we've interviewed. Look how much we've learned from every single one of them. Every time we do this, as we start the next podcast, we're not sure what it's going to be, but we know it's there from the wonderful people that we have in this industry that are very knowledgeable and very great managers. So we've been able to do something. We have really been able to do something that I never imagined could be this valuable to us as a team. Doing the podcast has really been very valuable to us. And hopefully the most important thing in the whole role of TPN has been what we're able to contribute back to the industry. Mm-hmm. Every time we finish these, I think, well, we did it again. We've contributed one more to this industry that we're in. So it's exciting.
Yeah, if anybody ever asks me who my mentor is, I'm going to say our parking industry podcast.
I mean, our main goal here with the podcast is to provide the knowledge and resources, and there's sometimes a bleed over in that. So I think one of the things we like to see is that someone comes on and the information that they provide is their knowledge of the industry, but they also become a resource. So I think any of these people that we have on the podcast would be open to helping mentor, because we know that that's an important piece to our industry. And if we have something that we have talked about, please reach out, and we're happy to help or point you in the right direction so that, again, we can all stay directed towards that same North Star and keep our industry moving forward at an appropriate pace and doing and balancing all of the new things that are coming our way. So we've really enjoyed talking with Kendra and having her on our podcast. We enjoyed hearing about how way.com is influencing our industry, with having her as kind of an anchor to the core values of parking and what she brings to their team there at way.com. So we appreciated everything that was discussed and new ideas that were brought forth. And we thank you for joining us here on the Our Parking Industry podcast. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.